could just as well be called the
Da, fără baterie nu prea mă las.
pulverized. Prussians managed to
S-a întâmplat nimic rău. Deocamdată îl merge.
Among those arrested was Louis.
Poftim? Asta e suportul.
Ar trebui prins cu ceva.
Da, corect. Că pe teren o să fie mai
Da.
greu de stabilizat. Pe masă așa e
Da,
ok.
pe masă e ok. Da, trebuie prins cu un suport cu ceva.
Da. Try again, finish, de asta mi zice că
Sau
sunt
băgat
broadcast.
într-o ceva, într-o cutie, într-o ceva să stea fix.
Live streaming, da, o să-l legăm mai mult ca sigur, cu o bandă de asta.
Da.
Și gata. Teradek, test, ăsta îmi zice că e pornit. Da, merge. E bine.
Da, e bine asta.
Da, la palierele stau bine, da.
Păi da.
Și până... Numai că încercăm să le împrăștiem mai multe rafturi și le-am mai mutat Matei cu Cătălin, iar eu nu le mai știu locul, că... La... O să facem video. Da, o să facem video și o să le mai mutăm acolo. Ia, avem aici chestii. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hai, cât ai de lei? Hello. Teste! Nu mă vezi deloc? Pe bune? Nu. Ok. Mult, cam mult. Teste, nu mă vezi deloc? Pe bune? Pe bune? Ia, avem aici 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hai, cât ai de lei? Teste, nu mă vezi deloc? Pe bune? Nu. Ok. Mult, cam mult. Psst. Ok.
Napoleon. When the news of their emperor's capture reached Paris on September the 4th, the government was so outraged that...
Ok, deconectez bateria nu după 2 minute, după câte minute? După 4 minute are. Și să vedem dacă rezistă. On. Chestii de astea, gata. Deja s-a descărcat cu 1%, de la 100% a trecut la 99%.
The emperor's capture reached Paris on September the 4th. The government was so outraged that...
Ok, deconectez bateria nu după 2 minute, după câte minute? După 4 minute are. Și să vedem dacă rezistă. On. Chestii de astea, gata. Deja s-a descărcat cu 1%, de la 100% a trecut la 99%.
It voted then and there to abolish the Second French Empire, along with its useless emperor. France immediately became the Third Republic. It wasn't the end of the war, though. That dragged on through the grueling siege of Paris. But for Louis Napoleon, it was done. Louis Napoleon was kept prisoner until a peace treaty was signed and the unification of Germany was declared on January the 18th, 1871. Finally, in March, the now former emperor was released back into exile in England. But his humiliations, they were not done yet. In the wake of France's epic defeat, Paris was seized by a radical revolutionary group that became known as the Paris Commune. They ruled for 2 months before putting Paris to the torch when the French army retook the city. The new Paris that Louis Napoleon had spent so long building was simply burned to the ground. Although it would be ultimately rebuilt to his designs, he never lived to see it. Over in England, Louis Napoleon had settled in the village of Chislehurst with his wife and their son, who they still called the Prince Imperial. It was a short and painful retirement. Louis Napoleon's health got worse until on January the 9th, 1873, he went to the hospital for a last-ditch operation to cure his bladder stones. He died under the knife at age 65. All of those times he'd listened to his mother as a young exile, and at age 60 for a last-ditch operation to cure his bladder stones. He died under the knife at age 65. All of those times he'd listened to his mother as a young exile and dreamed of being emperor, he could have never imagined that it would end like this. In 1879, Louis Napoleon's heir, the Prince Imperial, also died, extinguishing their family's line. 2 years later, his wife Eugenie had both of them reburied in Farnborough, a pleasantly boring town some 30 miles from London. Although the tomb that holds Napoleon III remains a tourist attraction, it's hardly as Invalides. So what, in the end, did Louis Napoleon accomplish? Well, he ruled France for longer than his uncle did, and he undoubtedly oversaw an industrial boom that modernized the French economy. He founded colonies like New Caledonia that are still departments of France today, and he promoted workers' and women's rights at a time when it was deeply unfashionable. On the other hand, he took France from a peaceful state back to one of dangerous warfare and paid a catastrophically high price. The peace settlements after the Franco-Prussian War crippled France all the way into World War I. But perhaps the biggest thing that the other Emperor Bonaparte accomplished was becoming the other Emperor Bonaparte. This was a man who, as a child, was banned from his home country, forced to live in exile, and derided as a clown. Yet through sheer dogged determination, he managed to conquer the very system that had locked him out, if only for a brief time. Was he a clown? Was he a tyrant? Was he a visionary leader let down by one disastrous lapse in judgment? Well, the jury's still out on that one. But there's one thing we cannot deny Louis Napoleon. He was, and will forever be, Napoleon III, Emperor of the French. So I hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that. What is a guy who's been lusting for power? The result was a conflict that killed nearly 1 million people, but left France and her ally Britain newly victorious on the European stage. This confidence boost led in turn to Napoleon III getting involved with Italy's Second War of Unification in 1859. Even Italian nationalists had tried to assassinate him the year before, throwing a bomb at his carriage that killed 14 of his entourage. You might have expected Napoleon III to fight against unification, but no. He sent the French army to help the Kingdom of Sardinia kick the Austrians out of their Italian colonies. They won that war too, which is why Nice and Savoy are currently part of France. By 1860, Louis Napoleon was riding high. As Napoleon III, had really made France great again. He'd also convinced himself that he was a tactical military genius on par with his legendary uncle. He'd even found time to marry Countess Eugenie de Montijo. But you know what they say about pride? It always comes before a fall, and to Louis Napoleon, he was a legendary fool. Historians of the Second French Empire call the period after 1860 the Liberal Empire. Why? Well, it's the period when Napoleon III pivoted from being a nasty despot to a slightly more cuddly one. The transformation came in 1860. To head off a political crisis over the huge loans his projects were racking up, Louis Napoleon offered his Senate new powers and eased censorship. The changes were enough to keep him in power and led to more liberalization down the line. Yet all this is really just a sideshow to the two major events of 1862. The first was something of a private problem. Louis Napoleon's reign had been partially held together by his boundless energy, but in 1862 he developed exceedingly painful bladder stones that sapped his energy and left him reliant on those around him. The second was far more consequential for world history, and that was the rise of Otto von Bismarck. We've actually got another Biographics video in the works about Bismarck, so we're not going to get too sidetracked with him right here, but just let me give you a very quick overview. Bismarck was the minister-president of Prussia, a Germanic country roughly analogous to modern eastern Germany and northern Poland, with its capital in Berlin. Bismarck was a firm believer in both the strategic use of warfare and the unification of all the many German statelets into a single Germany. He was also a political genius who didn't take fools lightly, which was a big problem for Louis Napoleon. Not that tiny Prussia appeared much of a threat to France in 1862. When Bismarck went to war against the Danes in 1864, Napoleon III barely even noticed. In October of 1865, Louis Napoleon even promised the Iron Chancellor that France wouldn't intervene if Prussia went to war with Austria. Less than a year later, the 7 Weeks' War ended with Vienna beaten. Louis Napoleon actually mediated the peace talks which oversaw the creation of a sort of half-unified Germany, the Northern German Confederation. This was a problem because it was now clear that this thing called Germany was becoming extremely big and extremely powerful in a very short space of time. But Napoleon III, he was simply too arrogant or maybe too deluded to realize the threat that Germany posed. He still thought that he was the senior partner in the relationship with Bismarck. It wasn't until Bismarck blocked the French annexation of Luxembourg by threatening war that Louis Napoleon realized that he was in over his head. The big trouble was that everyone else realized it too. When France backed off on Luxembourg, Bismarck was able to see just how weak the French Empire was. The French publicly turned on their emperor. In the 1869 elections, the government nearly lost control of the Senate. By the end of 1869, Napoleon III was forced to fully liberalize the empire just to keep power, turning it into a kind of constitutional monarchy. Now, unfortunately, the change meant listening more than ever to what the public wanted. And what the public wanted was war with Prussia. Even by the standards of the 19th century, the causes of the Franco-Prussian War are ridiculous beyond belief. In Spain, Queen Isabella abdicated the throne and a Prussian prince offered to take her place. France said no and sent their ambassador to tell the Prussian king to back off. The ambassador met the king on a walk, shouted at him for a minute, and then stormed off. And with that begins the Franco-Prussian War. Alright, so it was like Isabella abdicated the throne and a Prussian prince offered to take her place. France said no and sent their ambassador to tell the Prussian king to back off. The ambassador met the king on a walk, shouted at him for a minute, and then stormed off. And with that begins the Franco-Prussian War. Alright, so it was slightly more complicated than that in reality. The real trigger was the Enns dispatch, which contained an account of the meeting between the king and the ambassador that was perfectly calibrated to make both sides think that they'd been grievously insulted. It was edited by Bismarck, who by now had decided a quick war with the French would be the perfect bonding exercise to seal German unification. And he got his wish. On July the 19th, 1870, France declared war on Prussia. The French army's 280,000 troops, they were mobilized. Despite being shockingly ill by this stage, Napoleon III rode out to personally lead the troops. Amusingly, his staff were so sure that they'd soon be conquering German territory that they forgot to pack any maps of their own country. The first engagement, it came on August the 4th, 1870, and it was a massacre. The well-trained Prussians made mincemeat out of Louis Napoleon's shambolic army for 2 entire days. After a staggering retreat, the French fought again on August the 16th, and again they were wiped out. Getting desperate, Louis Napoleon tried to summon the spirit of his dead uncle. He gathered all remaining French soldiers for an attack on the Prussian troops besieging Metz. This was exactly the sort of foolhardy gamble that his uncle would have made, but the difference is his uncle would have pulled it off. On the 1st of September 1870, the French and the Prussians fought the Battle of Sedan, which could just as well be called the defeat of Sedan. The French, they were pulverized. The Prussians managed to encircle and then capture their entire army. Among those arrested was Louis Napoleon. When the news of their emperor's capture reached Paris on September the 4th, the government was so outraged that it voted then and there to abolish the Second French Empire, along with its useless emperor. France immediately became the Third Republic. It wasn't the end of the war, though. That dragged on through the grueling siege of Paris. But for Louis Napoleon, it was done. Louis Napoleon was kept prisoner until a peace treaty was signed and the unification of Germany was declared on January the 18th, 1871. Finally, in March, the now former emperor was released back into exile in England. But his humiliations, they were not done yet. In the wake of France's epic defeat, Paris was seized by a radical revolutionary group that became known as the Paris Commune. They ruled for 2 months before putting Paris to the torch when the French army retook the city. The new Paris that Louis Napoleon had spent so long building was simply burned to the ground. Although it would be ultimately rebuilt to his designs, it he would never live to see it. Over in England, Louis Napoleon had settled in the village of Chislehurst with his wife and their son, who they still called the Prince Imperial. It was a short and painful retirement. Louis Napoleon's health got worse until on January the 9th, 1873, he went to the hospital for a last-ditch operation to cure his bladder stones. He died under the knife at age 65. All of those times he'd listened to his mother as a young exile and dreamed of being emperor, he could have never imagined that it would end like this. In 1879, Louis Napoleon's heir, the Prince Imperial, also died, extinguishing their family's line. 2 years later, his wife Eugenie had both of them reburied in Farnborough, a pleasantly boring town some 30 miles from London. Although the tomb that holds Napoleon III remains a tourist attraction, it's hardly as of a lead. So what, in the end, did Louis Napoleon accomplish? Well, he ruled France for longer than his uncle did, and he undoubtedly oversaw.
Ia să vedem ce m-a mai trimis sora mea. Ok, cred că live-ul e suficient de lung, 18 minute și ceva. Ne apare pe contul de YouTube, dar pe aplicație în momentul de față, adică acum, am 19 minute. Iar în YouTube am 18:45 acum. Deci, cu minim 20 de secunde în urmă în browser decât în aplicație. Față de aplicație fie. Ok. 87% bateria după ce gata, 20 de minute de streaming. Și 16 minute fără baterie. Îi dau stop. Sau legend.